Echoes in the Void, Captain. Zara Moth of the Trilaxian Deep Space Survey pressed her six-fingered hand against the observation deck's reinforced viewing panel. The nebula of whispers stretched endlessly before them, its purple and gold gases swirling, in patterns that had mesmerized star travelers for generations. Her ship, the Pathfinder's Dream, was one of the most advanced vessels in the Trilaxian fleet, equipped with sensors that could detect a grain of sand from 3 light-years away. "Captain, we're picking up something unusual," called Lieutenant Vextar from his station. The young officer's crystalline skin flickered with excitement, a trait common to his people when they discovered something new. "There's a massive object hidden deep in the nebula's core. It's big enough to be a small moon, but the readings are all wrong." Zara Moth glided across the bridge on her 4 legs, her elongated neck allowing her to peer over Vextar's shoulder at the sensor display. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. The object was enormous, easily 10 times the size of their own ship, and it was clearly artificial. But the design was unlike anything in their extensive databases. "How long has it been out there?" she asked, her voice carrying the authority that had made her the youngest captain in Trilaxian history. "Based on the cosmic radiation patterns and debris accumulation, I'd estimate at least 100,000 years, possibly more," replied Dr. Kethvar, their chief science officer. The elderly scholar's tentacles writhed with curiosity as he studied the readings. "Captain, this predates every known civilization in our records." The bridge fell silent except for the gentle humming of their ship's systems. In their corner of the galaxy, 100,000 years was ancient beyond measure. The oldest known species, the wise ethereals of Sigma Prime, had only achieved spaceflight 60,000 years ago. What could have built something so massive so long ago? "Take us closer," Zara Moth decided, "but keep our shields at maximum and weapons ready." Something that old might have automated defenses. As the Pathfinder's Dream descended deeper into the nebula, the mysterious object gradually became clearer on their screens. It was definitely a ship, but its design was alien in ways that hurt to contemplate. The hull was dark as midnight, covered in scars and gouges that spoke of terrible battles. Strange symbols were etched along its sides, worn almost smooth by countless millennia of cosmic dust and radiation. "By the 7 suns," whispered Navigator Thelmos, her insectoid eyes wide with amazement. "Look at the weapon ports. There must be thousands of them." Indeed, the ancient vessel bristled with what could only be weapon emplacements. Massive gun turrets, each one larger than their entire ship, dotted the hull like metallic growths. Between them ran conduits and channels that suggested energy weapons of impossible power. This wasn't just a ship. It was a fortress designed for war on an unimaginable scale. "I'm detecting faint power readings," Dr. Kethvar announced, his scientific excitement overriding his usual caution. "Some systems are still active after all this time. The power source appears to be something we don't recognize. It's not fusion, not antimatter, not even zero-point energy as we understand it." Zara Moth studied the readings carefully. Every instinct told her to retreat, to report their discovery to the Galactic Council and let someone else investigate. But the explorer's spirit that had driven her people to the stars wouldn't let her back down. This was the discovery of a lifetime, perhaps of a millennium. "Prepare a boarding party," she ordered. "Dr. Kethvar, Lieutenant Vextar, Sergeant Mordak, and Engineer Plixon, you're with me. The rest of you monitor our signals and be ready to leave immediately if something goes wrong." The boarding party suited up in their environmental gear and crossed to the ancient ship through a docking tube. As they stepped through the airlock, their helmet lights revealed corridors that stretched beyond the reach of their illumination. The passages were enormous, clearly built for beings much larger than any known species. "The artificial gravity is still working," Engineer Plixon observed, her mechanical limbs clicking against the deck plating as she tested the atmosphere. "Air is breathable, though it's cold enough to freeze water. This ship was built to last." They moved deeper into the vessel, their footsteps echoing strangely in the empty halls. The walls were covered with symbols and markings that their translation systems couldn't interpret. Battle damage was everywhere. Blast marks, melted bulkheads, and hull breaches that had been sealed with what looked like emergency patches. "Captain, you need to see this," Dr. Kethvar called from ahead. He was standing before a massive blast door that had been torn apart by some unimaginable weapon. Beyond it lay a chamber filled with what could only be memorial walls, surfaces, covered with millions upon millions of names in the same unknown script. "So many names," Lieutenant Vextar whispered. "How many beings died on this ship?" As they continued their exploration, they found more clues about the ship's builders. The crew quarters were designed for bipedal beings approximately 2 meters tall. The command centers showed evidence of advanced technology that made their own systems look primitive. Most disturbing of all, they found weapons that defied understanding, devices that seemed designed to fight, enemies that normal physics couldn't touch. It was in what appeared to be the main computer core that they made their most significant discovery. Dr. Kethvar managed to interface with one of the still active terminals, and suddenly holographic displays came to life around them. Images flashed past, star maps showing regions of space that no longer existed, battle formations involving thousands of ships, and faces of the beings who had crewed this vessel. The faces made them all step back in shock. The beings were strange, but somehow familiar, with 2 arms, 2 legs, and expressive faces. Their skin varied in color from pale to dark, and fibrous material grew from their heads. They looked almost like the mythical first builders from the oldest legends. "I'm getting translation data," Dr. Kethvar announced, his tentacles working frantically at the alien controls. "The ship's computer is trying to communicate with us. It's learning our language protocols." A holographic figure appeared in the center of the room, one of the alien beings in what looked like a military uniform. When it spoke, the words were initially incomprehensible, but gradually the ship's translation system began converting them into something they could understand. "If you are receiving this message," the figure said, "then our watch may finally be ending. We are the last of the Terran Defense Force, and we have held the line for longer than any species should have to endure." The hologram flickered and stabilized. "We call ourselves humans, though we are no longer what we once were. For 97,000 years we have fought an enemy that exists outside normal reality, entities we call the Swarm. They consume not just matter and energy, but the very possibility of existence itself." Zaramoth felt her blood turn cold. She had never heard of any enemy like this, but the ancient human's words carried a weight of truth that was impossible to ignore. "We evacuated every species we could find," the human continued. "Moved entire civilizations away from the Swarm's advance, telling them to build new homes in safer regions of space. Most think we simply vanished, and perhaps that's for the best. What we became to fight this war, it's better if they never know." The message paused, and the human's expression grew infinitely sad. "We transformed ourselves, gave up our bodies, our humanity, everything we were. We became weapons, eternal, guardians monsters to fight monsters. Some of us became ships like this one. Others became living weapons. A few became something worse, creatures that could hunt the Swarm in dimensions where normal life cannot survive." Lieutenant Vextar was recording everything, his crystalline form pulsing with barely contained excitement. This was rewriting everything they knew about galactic history. "The war isn't over," the human warned. "It may never be over, but every day we hold them back is another day that species like yours can grow, can learn, can build something beautiful in this universe. Remember us not as we became, but as what we chose to protect." The message ended, leaving them in stunned silence. Around them, the ancient computers continued their quiet work, maintaining systems that had run for nearly 100 millennia without rest. "Captain," Engineer Plixon said quietly, "I'm detecting massive power buildups deep in the ship. Something is waking up down there." Guardians of the Forgotten. The deeper sections of the ancient human ship felt different from the areas above. Where the upper levels had been cold and silent, these passages thrummed with barely contained energy. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with a faint inner light, and the alien symbols carved into them glowed softly as the boarding party approached. Power levels are increasing exponentially, Engineer Plixon reported, her mechanical sensors clicking rapidly as they tried to process the readings. Whatever's down here has been dormant for millennia, but it's waking up fast. Captain Zaramoth led her team through corridors that grew wider and taller as they descended. The architecture here was different too, less like a ship and more like a temple or cathedral. Massive columns supported a ceiling that stretched beyond the reach of their lights, and the floor was covered with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and move when viewed from the corner of their eyes. "Captain, I'm reading something massive ahead," Dr. Kethvar announced, his tentacles quivering with excitement and fear. "It's enormous, easily the size of a city block, and it's definitely artificial." They emerged into a chamber so vast that their helmet lights couldn't reach the far walls. In the center rose a structure that defied easy description, part machine, part crystal, part something that existed beyond their understanding of physics. It pulsed with a deep blue light that seemed to reach directly into their minds. As they approached, holographic interfaces began appearing around them. Symbols and equations floated in the air, written in mathematical languages that transcended species barriers. And then, without warning, a voice spoke directly into their consciousness. New visitors, organic, multi-species, designation, unknown. The voice was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. It simply was. "I am Sentinel-7, last active, node of the Terran Defense Network. I have waited 96,743 years, 8 months, 12 days for someone to find us." Zaramoth stepped forward, fighting every instinct that told her to flee. "I am Captain Zaramoth of the Trilaxian Deep Space Survey. We found your ship drifting in the nebula. Are you human?" A pause that lasted an eternity. "I was human once, as were the other 6,432 minds that comprise my consciousness. We volunteered for the final transformation, when our biological forms could no longer endure the strain of the war." The chamber around them shifted, and suddenly they were standing in a holographic recreation of what the ship had looked like in its prime. Thousands of humans moved through the corridors, but they were unlike the humans from the earlier recording. These beings were clearly modified, taller, stronger, with cybernetic enhancements that made them look more machine than flesh. "We started as explorers," Sentinel-7 continued, "much like yourselves. But the swarm found us early in our expansion into space. They are not from our dimension. They exist in the spaces between reality, feeding on the possibility of existence itself. Where they pass, not only does matter cease to exist, but it becomes impossible for matter to have ever existed there." Dr. Kethvar was frantically recording everything, his scientific mind struggling to process information that challenged the very foundations of physics. "The dead zones," he whispered. "The empty regions of space where nothing exists. Not even quantum particles." "Correct. The swarm consumed 17% of this galaxy before we found ways to fight them. But fighting beings that exist partially outside reality required us to abandon our limitations. We uploaded our minds into quantum matrices. We replaced our bodies with mechanical forms that could survive in impossible conditions. Some of us became ships like this one. Others became weapons that could strike across dimensional barriers." The holographic display changed, showing massive battles that took place in spaces that hurt to look at directly. Human ships, if they could still be called ships, fought entities that shifted between dimensions, weapons that fired bullets of crystallized time, and barriers that bent space into pretzel-like configurations. "But the greatest sacrifice was yet to come," Sentinel-7 continued. "To truly fight the swarm, some of us had to become like them. We sent volunteers into the spaces between dimensions, knowing they would be changed into something that could no longer be called human. They became the hunters, beings that could track and destroy the swarm in their own realm." Lieutenant Vextar's crystalline form was pulsing rapidly with distress. "What happened to them? The hunters? They are still out there, still fighting. They have been for nearly 100,000 years. They can never return to normal space. They would unmake reality simply by existing here. But they continue their eternal hunt, keeping the swarm contained in the deep void between galaxies. Zaramoth felt a chill that went beyond physical cold. And you? Why are you still here? I am a guardian of the Guardians. My purpose is to monitor the swarm's movements and coordinate the defense of this galaxy. For 96,000 years, I have watched younger species grow and develop, never knowing that their very existence depends on the sacrifice of beings they've never heard of. The chamber shifted again, showing them star maps of familiar space. Zaramoth recognized the territories of dozens of species: the Trilaxian Empire, the Ethereal Collective, the trading routes of the merchant clans. All of it existed in the EI, regions that the humans had designated as safe zones nearly 100 millennia ago. Your civilizations, your arts, your sciences, all of it exists because we drew the swarm away from the galactic core and held them at the rim. We evacuated every species we could find, told them to build their new homes in areas we could protect, then stood guard at the gates of hell to make sure nothing followed them. Engineer Plixen's mechanical limbs were trembling with the implications. But if you've been fighting for so long, the war must be nearly over? The silence that followed was more frightening than any words could have been. The war will never be over, Sentinel-7 finally said. The swarm exists outside time as you understand it. They are patient beyond measure, and they learn from every encounter. But something has changed. 3 months ago, I detected new swarm activity. They are testing our defenses again, probing for weaknesses. The holographic display showed recent sensor readings, distortions in space-time near the galaxy's edge, areas where the normal laws of physics seem to be breaking down. The hunters are holding them back, but their numbers are finite. Every engagement costs us warriors we cannot replace. And the younger generations of transformed humans have been away so long that they're barely recognizable as having once been from our species. Dr. Kethvar stepped forward, his scientific mind grappling with possibilities. What do you need from us? Why reveal yourself now? Because the galaxy may need to know the truth soon. If our defenses fail, if the swarm breaks through, your people will need to understand what they're facing. More importantly, they'll need to know that it is possible to fight back, but the cost of victory may be everything they think defines them as living beings. The ancient AI paused, and for a moment they could sense the weight of nearly 100,000 years of solitary vigil. I am preparing contingencies, weapons caches hidden throughout safe space, technology that could transform your ships and people as we transformed ourselves. Instructions for creating your own hunters, should the worst come to pass. Zaramoth felt the full weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She had come here looking for scientific discoveries, but instead she had found the guardians of all galactic civilization. There is one more thing you should know, Sentinel-7 said, and now its voice carried a note of something that might have been hope. The humans who became the hunters were not the only ones who survived. Deep in the void between galaxies there are others. Colonies of the transformed, cities that exist in folded space, fleets that patrol the absolute darkness. They have grown and changed beyond all recognition, but they remember their purpose. Are they still human? Lieutenant Vextar asked. They are what humanity became when it chose to preserve something greater than itself. Whether that makes them still human is a question each species must answer for itself, should the time come to follow the same path. The chamber began to dim as Sentinel-7's attention turned to other matters. I will continue my watch. Your species and all the others in safe space can continue to grow, to explore, to become something beautiful. But remember, if the darkness ever comes for you, remember that others fought it first. And remember that victory sometimes requires becoming something you never imagined you could be. As the boarding party made their way back to their ship, each carried with them the knowledge that their entire civilization existed because of beings who had sacrificed not just their lives, but their very identity. In the depths of space, the hunters continued their eternal vigil, no longer recognizably human but still carrying out humanity's greatest promise, to stand between the darkness and the light, no matter the cost. The Pathfinder's dream departed, the nebula of whispers carrying more than just scientific data. They carried the truth about guardians who watched from the shadows, protectors who had given up everything to ensure that younger species could reach for the stars without fear. And in the depths of the ancient human ship, Sentinel-7 returned. To its endless watch, monitoring sensors that reached into dimensions where normal matter could not exist, coordinating with beings that were no longer bound by the limitations of biological form, and preparing for the day when the galaxy might need to learn what it truly meant to fight for something greater than survival.